Hello, beautiful, light-filled souls. I am so excited to have Dorothy Rowe here to talk today. And she has been on Buddha at the Gas Pump, and she has a YouTube channel that's fabulous. I've actually had a bit of a healing from one of her videos, it saved me thousands of dollars. And so I'm so grateful for that. And I can't wait to talk more about healing. I've interviewed other near-death experiencers who have become healers, and Dorothy is interesting because at a very young age, and I didn't get to hear too much about this, she was able to feel and see the presence of angels, and I would like to hear a little bit more about that. But you can introduce yourself a bit, and then we'll jump right into your childhood, if that's all right.
Thank you, Tricia. That's so sweet of you. All right. So I just think as a point of introduction, I'd like to just lay out in a sentence what energy healing is, because at least by my understanding, and for me, it has evolved not through various training programs, but it evolved through my own healing experience. And we'll get into that more in a minute when we talk about my history. But in a word, energy healing is the ability to focus attention intelligently in order to produce a specific effect in the physiology. And the beauty of attention, I'm a mom, so I have children, and when children arrive in the world, from the first moment, even before they breathe, they can focus their attention. So all of us are kind of like experts at focusing attention. And from my years of meditation training, I realized and learned and experienced that attention is consciousness. It is divine being. It is pure awareness, pure perception. It is the material of which the source of creation is comprised. So that means that our ability to focus our attention is like a divine gift, basically, that allows us to bring the quality of wholeness or totality to an area in need. And that's why we experience pain. Pain is a flag or a signal that says, please bring your wholeness here. So when pain is there, it's hard to avoid putting attention where the pain is. And when the attention comes, it comes with a complete, total resource. It comes with the resource to heal. So we'll talk more about that. You can see I've got charts.
And I do want to jump in just as a little quick side. If someone's in a lot of pain, like I have a friend who her partner is in and out of the hospital right now, and I told her maybe to both of them to focus on this healing energy and pay really close attention to this healing energy as it's coming in, like pay incredible close attention so that their attention is shifted off the illness and the pain into that possibility of healing. That's what another friend of mine suggested. Is that something along the lines of what you might tell someone in a crisis moment?
Yes, absolutely. And the reason is that the attention carries totality or wholeness with it. But what that means is it also carries the antidote. And so having the ability to shift awareness from being gripped by the darkness or pain or discomfort and to shift into just the flow of awareness itself allows the individual to come into more of a witnessing position with whatever their concern might be. And so that witnessing position automatically creates access to the resources that heal. And yes, at that point, then attention on the experience of transformation that's taking place. And always we are in crisis because there's a need for transformation. In fact, in my opinion, at this point, basically the essence of human existence is evolutionary transformation. It is the expansion of consciousness. That's my perception.
Interesting. And I'm working on a particular issue, and I saw and I heard in one of your videos too that it's two different ways of healing. You can shift into a new time frame or new reality where you're more whole and then your whole body shifts, or you can work at kind of clearing out darkness, and they're kind of the same thing. And so I see it as, okay, there's light coming in, there's little pieces of gray or darkness, and the light's illuminating that, and it's pouring through me. And
yeah, beautiful.
That's the way I'm seeing it from what you've talked about. Interesting.
It's such a holistic process. And it gets into fields of consciousness that are very abstract, that go beyond what we consider our senses of perception. You know, it gets into an area where we're utilizing finer perception, if we can call it that. And at that point, it's a little bit like, you know, the story of the 5 blind men feeling the elephant, you know, and one feels the tail. Well, this is like a snake type animal, you know, and one feels the ear. Well, it's a big flat animal like that. So the thing is that there are many different ways of looking at the process and describing it. And as an energy healer, I've had to cultivate or craft various constructs for looking at the energy healing process, because different people resonate with different means of understanding, different perspectives on it.
Interesting. So I do want to kind of get a broader picture of your journey, because I haven't heard too much about your childhood, and maybe we could start there. I was really fascinated that you connected with angels as a kid. So could you tell me more?
Sure. Thanks for asking. It's so fun to talk about yourself. So I had good memory when I was little. Like, I still clearly remember the day that my mother was taking me home from the hospital. You know, so I have like nice, clear memories that go back, a long way. And when I was little, we lived in an old house. And old houses particularly have a lot of memories stored in them. So, and it was a fine house. So it had lots of beautiful memories. And I think that's maybe one of the things that woke me up when I was quite little, was the fact that every little area of the house had its own special feel, every little corner, particularly out in the gardens, of course. You know, there was the north side of the house that had a lot of fairy energy in it, because the fiddlehead ferns were growing there, and the pussy willows, and the different little flowers that had their own special quality. And the water spout came out there, and the water somehow attracted a lot of like little birds and things, and so little kinds of animals. And so as a child, there was a natural sensitivity to the life force that was in all things. And I definitely had experiences of seeing, I would call them like lights or movements of, really the word I use now is subtle perception, but it was seeing things that weren't fully physical, I guess you could say that. And also, you know, as a very tiny child, there were moments that weren't so happy too. You know, at nighttime sometimes energies come along that are like scary for little children. But nonetheless, when I tried to talk to my parents about it, they were tended to be resistant, and they didn't have a paradigm in which to fit my experience. So rather than saying, oh yes, dear, you're having refined perception, they just either pretended like I hadn't spoken anything, or just told me I was daydreaming or something, and never mind, and we don't want to talk about it, whatever. But there was definitely a sense that what I was perceiving was real. And so instead of erasing those memories or trying to stop having the experience, I just let it continue with me. So I kept a file somewhere in the back of my mind of like, oh, those experiences that don't fit with my reality or something.
And that's great that you held on to them. A lot of people just say, okay, they're not validated, so I'm not going to think about this. But to hold on to them was rare. That's beautiful.
I think all little children go through a moment of crisis somewhere around 2 to 4, where they realize either they can hang on to their memories of heaven and that level of experience of the finer realms of creation, or they can fit in with society. That's their choice. You know, they could be an outcast, or they could be in the groove. So most kids at that point, if they choose to stay, remain. And I also suspect this is why in centuries past, so many children left early, because they came and realized, oh, this isn't really quite it's not as much fun as heaven. Maybe I don't want to hang around after all.
So did you feel the energy of angels? Did you feel, or did you saw little lights that represented them, but you could feel that energy coming through you, or there? Did you try to interact with them at that age?
Yeah, my experience was that I often saw the lights at moments of synchronicity. At moments when all of a sudden everything in my world kind of lined up somehow, there'd often be a light at that point. And so I felt them as validations to some sort of experiences I was having that were aligning me with my own future, or aligning me with where I was supposed to be going, and not knowing that exactly, of course, as a child. And the other types of experiences came along more dramatically later on when I was a little older, actually after I learned meditation as a teenager. I had some rough times. We all have rough teenage years. So a lot of people have a little roughness in the teenage years. And I noticed that a lot of times when I was distraught or having a rough time, rough go of it, there'd be a presence with me, a soft, loving, kind, compassionate presence that knew my heart and knew what was going on and would comfort me. And I had a beautiful experience after my father died. I was in such crazy grief after my father died. I was teaching at that time at school, and I felt as if my heart was an open wound that just wouldn't stop bleeding. It just ended emotionally. I just felt like there was a leak, of an emotional leak taking place in my heart. And one day, deep in meditation, I would have my eyes closed. I felt someone come right up in front of me, and they reached out and they touched me right in the middle of my chest, and it closed the leak. And I popped my eyes open. Who did that? And there was nobody there, but I knew that it was definitely some form of creation that had that incredible beneficence and vision to know that if that leak wasn't cleared, I might have died. I was very ill at the time.
So a lot of people long to connect with their angels, and they'll put these comments, at the bottom of YouTube videos. And I say, if you feel that presence, if you feel that softness, if you feel that comfort, don't doubt it. I mean, just understand it the way you look at a wave coming in the ocean or anything, the wind blowing, it's real. Like I know that it's real because having left form and seen, the magnificence of these angels and their healing potential, because many of them do have that potential or that potential of protection, what they are sending and what we are feeling is a reality. And I think people maybe are feeling it, but they're brushing it aside. And so I think it's really just opening up that sensitivity. At least that's what I say to people. Do you have any advice for people who want to connect with their angels?
Yes, I do have videos about it too.
Oh, good.
But I think the main thing that keeps people separate from their angels is a belief in separation itself. And that we come from in the West, there's a long tradition of thinking of God up in some lofty heaven somewhere, and those of us on earth is kind of separate. I hope this doesn't offend any of your viewers. But anyway, it's the basic, Christian belief, basically, that God is up in heaven somewhere, and I am on earth, and I'm just like the tiniest grain of sand in the universe. And my only connection with the divine is through the suffering of the Son of God, which is an event that took place 2,000 years ago. So it's sometimes for some people can seem a little remote. Whereas the nature of, if we think about connecting to the angels, and we could say, well, maybe I'm not so separate from my own divinity as I thought I was. The next question is, well, let's analyze for a minute what an angel is. Let's just take a look at that and see how it ties in to what we understand ourselves to be. So if we think of an angel, it's a being of, and help me out here, Tricia, if I'm off my mark, because you've seen him recently. I have too, but anyway, together we can validate. It's a being of light, right? Light body, can move without resistance through space and time, can go anywhere, anytime, any place, knows you intimately, cares about you. They can hear your thoughts. They know what is going on in your heart. They have the capacity to manipulate natural law in such a way as to create or promote change, right? They can help you, like the story of the other day, I was taking the kids to the movies and it's a 30-minute drive and we were late. So I'm, come on, we gotta go. And when we got in the car late, 10 minutes late out the door, we started up the road, and halfway up the road to the next town, there was a 4-car accident. And we were like one of the first peoples to come across the accident. And I realized that if we'd been on time, we would have been in the middle of the accident. And so I knew that that was a kind of angelic intervention, that there, for whatever reason, we were delayed so that we didn't end up in a bad situation that wasn't our fate at that time to be in that. However, I'm just seeing all the angelic work that was being done in that accident. Anyway, moving on. Angels can do things. They can manipulate this realm, the physical, like you were saying, they can heal the body, they can manipulate the physical realm. Okay. So if we let ourselves entertain the possibility of a paradigm where we don't die, but after the physical body, the physical form goes, that the soul remains. And we think about, well, what would we be like? What would I be like in, say, 1,000 years or 1,000,000 years? I might be a being of light with a light body. That's possible. Very wise, who can move through space-time like nothing, who has a vested interest in my well-being now. Because if that's my future, then you betcha I would be back here helping myself in a heartbeat, right? And who has the ability to manipulate laws of nature in such a way that I could help myself.
And that brings up a point that I haven't delved into often, but I recognized my angels. So when I saw them, they were familiar to me, and I was a little embarrassed. I know this sounds strange, by how intelligent they were. I was like, why would such intelligent beings choose me? And that's a part of me. And how can I be that intelligent? So there was this like humility and shock. So it seemed as if they knew so much more about the cosmos, but yet they were a part of me on some level. So I get what you're saying. That is a possibility, because there was a recognition when I saw them.
Exactly. They feel familiar. They feel familiar. So most people have the experience in their lifetime that if they do experience the presence of angels, they experience it from one side, which is the side of being human and having a trouble, and the angel comes. And it just happens by chance, because of my history as a meditation practitioner and teacher for many decades now, over 40 years, knock on wood, that I had the good fortune of experiencing that scenario from both sides. From having been the distraught teenager who had the comfort come to me to heal me, and then later, decades down the road, when I was deep, deep in a meditation period, of actually feeling myself move through time back to my teenage self and perform a healing on myself. And that's when I realized, oh, that was me. That I thought was an angel, that was me.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say this. I didn't understand why I wrote this. My book is not published yet, but right after my near-death experience, I laid in bed in this body cast, and I thought, I'm outside of time right now, and I'm going to send healing back to me and everyone that I knew. And so yeah, I was in college at the time, and we took lots of chances with binge drinking and drugs, and I just sent light to myself walking down those streets at all those times, and wondered how I'd made it. But I sent light to everyone in this time period, everyone in the past, and myself. And I really felt like that was a possibility at that time. And then, of course, time went on. I was like, wow, I was thinking some weird thoughts.
Right. Did I really do that? Yeah, one can doubt, for sure. And for me, the only reason that I didn't end up doubting was because I had already been through the earlier period where I had been in the presence of an angel and comforted. And so when I had that other experience come, where I was the other side and I was the angel doing the comforting, then it started to click. I started to put two and two together on that account. And that's why actually I have this chart back here.
Yes, and I do want to get to all that, but for those who haven't seen your interview at Buddha at the Gas Pump, I would like to hear about your healing crisis, and how I loved your description of being at the mall and how everything just kind of opened up and you could see things differently after this healing crisis that you went through, and how it opened you up to practicing healing. So I would like to hear some more about that.
Thanks, Tricia. That's so sweet of you to ask. So yeah, it happened that after I learned to meditate as a teenager, I decided that I wanted to devote my life to world peace. So I became a volunteer for world peace, and I worked, on a very kind of meager stipend, and lived in a very ascetic manner for years, till I met my husband. And then we got together, and he was also a volunteer for world peace. So we kind of kept that lifestyle going. And I was doing that for many years and working very, very hard until such time as my father, and also my meditation, the man who kind of organized the meditation, which I followed, both passed away within about a month or two of each other. And so it was very difficult to lose both my real-time father, with whom I had a really beautiful relationship. He was a beautiful, amazing, intelligent, wonderful man who was a perfect father to me, so God bless him. And my meditation teacher, who also was supremely wonderful. My spiritual teacher, we could say. And that was very difficult for me. Hard enough to lose my own father, but then when everybody in the community I was living were also grieving over the loss of the leader of the organization, that was, there wasn't like anywhere to turn. There was just grief everywhere. And I was working about 140 hours a week at that time. I'd start work at 4 a.m. and go to bed about midnight.
Wow.
It was a very intense time. It was very intense. And at the same time, there were other factors that caused the breakdown, which including that we lost all of our hot water for 10 months during the winter. And of course, Iowa winters get really dreadfully cold. So, getting up at 4 a.m. in the morning and washing my hair under ice water was not the easiest thing to do. And so, and then, washing, trying to keep, boil water on the stove so I could make warm water for the kids to bathe in it was just a lot. There was a lot of pressure on me. And then I was taking care of my father who was dying. So I was his night nurse. So at midnight, I'd go over and lay on the floor next to him and be up sometimes 2 or 3 times in the night taking care of his needs. So I was burning myself at both ends, but I had felt like Superwoman for decades. I was just like, bring it, man, just bring it. So, so I felt really, really strong. But then when he died and then my meditation teacher died, all of a sudden I felt all those qualities that make me strong, those father qualities. The father is strong and he protects you and he takes care of you. I felt like bereft of those qualities. And so my body just really broke down. Oh, and I was going through menopause. Did I say that? Yeah, it wasn't a good time. Anyway, so I feel for anybody in those situations. Menopause, I automatically feel for you. Anyway, yeah. So my body got really, really sick. And it had some kind of mysterious illness. So I was going to doctors and doctors didn't know what to do. And I tried various types of natural medicine and Ayurveda, and I had already been following an Ayurvedic routine. So, I couldn't really make my diet any more Ayurvedic than it already was, things like that. And then they said it was something with the nervous system. There was some damage in the nervous system is what they said. But one day I felt well enough in the middle of that cold winter with no hot water. I felt well enough to at least put my clothes on. And my husband said, we've been cooped up in the house all winter with these 3 kids. Let's go to the mall and take a walk. And I'm like, I don't want to go in a store. It's like too much input I just need to be like, careful and gentle with myself. And he's like, we won't go in a store. We'll just walk in the mall. It's fine. Yeah, send the kids to a movie, something like that. And so we're walking through the mall and a peace came over my being. It was such a peace. It was such a sweet, soothing feeling. And I started to hear a kind of a murmuring whisper. And I looked around and I realized I wasn't hearing the voices of the people. I was hearing their thoughts. And as I would focus in on someone, I'd noticed that I was getting kind of a read on their physiologies. I could see inside the physiology and I could tell what they were feeling. And I saw a lot of things that didn't make a lot of sense to me, like cords of light, beams of light coming out of people's heads and connecting into stuff like their bag of stuff and their wallet and their friend who they were with and going clear out of the mall. And I saw lots of other impressions and visual sensations, including angels and such that I didn't really have a big paradigm to fit all that vision into.
Were you overwhelmed in that point? Because I've only held space for a split second where I've seen angels and entities, and there was a moment after my near-death experience where I thought, why don't I see them? And then it just clicked, and they were everywhere. And I saw this crowded street, and there were angels and lost spirits, and it was just this big crowd of beings, and I was like, whoa, that's a lot. Shut it down. Were you overwhelmed, or did that peace just give you a way to handle it?
You answered it. That's it. The peace was there. And so the peace made it possible to just move with it. So as we moved through the mall for the next 10 or 15 minutes, I was just observing and reporting to my husband, because I turned to him and I said, oh, did the mall just suddenly transform itself into an energy field and there's blah, blah, blah? I'm explaining. He's like, no, it looks bad. So anyway, so we moved through the mall, and after about 10 or 15 minutes, it just kind of faded off, but the peace remained. And that was so key for me, because it was the peace that became the foundation for my own healing. And I found that the experience of the opening of perception occurred again later, it began coming back. And as you so aptly described, I noticed that I could sort of open and close it. Like you said, it was overwhelming, so you closed it. I found after a while that I could sort of control the opening and closing of that experience.
Wonderful.
So, yeah, it was useful. The next time
Yeah.
it came up, I was out in nature, and so I didn't see people. I saw all the way through to the reaches of the heavens and all the way down into the earth and all the nature spirits and all the, flows of earth intelligence that were moving around in the field that I was walking through, little field forest area. So, yeah.
So did you immediately start healing people around you and start in that way, like friends and family members, or did you kind of keep this to yourself for a while? Or
First I had to heal Dorothy, and I was still in crisis even after the mall event, and it was just one thing after another for quite a while. But I did have the good fortune after a few months to run into an old friend who'd been a monk for 32 years. He's a sweetest man. I think he even has a YouTube channel now. But anyway, bless his heart, he said to me, he didn't see all those things I was seeing, but he knew a lot about energy healing, and he knew that I could use my vision. He could show me how to use what I saw to heal myself. And primarily what my friend Nick provided for me was a lexicon for describing the experience. Because when you first look, as you described, you're walking down the street, it's like looking into the ocean, and it's just so full, and you don't even know where to start to describe. But then he and I were going back and forth, and he'd say, there's this structure, and then I would see it, and I'm like, okay, that's what that, labeling it. We were just labeling everything. And labeling, as you know, as a teacher, that's what teachers do to a large degree, is we provide a means of verbally making order from the chaos that's around, or the chaos of a field. If you're teaching the field of psychology or writing or whatever you teach, you have to make sense out of it by giving labels to things.
And I just interviewed a friend of mine named Human, and he was saying that the actual word of, say, angels or entities, like those hold a power as well. So actually giving name to these things can be a power in its own. Do you find that with healing, that giving names to these things helps people?
Yes, very much so. In fact, from the meditation tradition that I was raised in comes from the ancient Vedic science, from the language of Sanskrit. And the nature of the Sanskrit language is that the words, the consonants and the vowels themselves hold a particular sound frequency which represents the thing they describe. So if I use the word, if I make a sound like, say, ta, ta, it has kind of like a sharp quality to it, right? Or if I make a sound like ah, it has like a really soft open quality. And so we know that the different sounds have different vibrational effects just from the sound value itself. So the fascination of Sanskrit is that the sound and the object are the same. They call that namarupa, name and form. Namarupa, which means the name actually is the form.
Yes, awesome. Yes, I understand that. So when he gave you a language for what you were seeing and experiencing, you could both describe it and feel it as you began to work on yourself?
Right, right. Yeah, so I was working on myself and brought this body back into health again, which was quite a relief because I was so uncomfortable. I really would have been really happy if I died. I was uncomfortable enough that I was ready to just leave and go join my dad, whatever. But it wasn't meant to go at the point, actually before the mall experience, I had kind of given up to God. I just said, look, just take me. I think I don't want to be here anymore. I'm done. And then the mall experience was like the answer back, which was the way I would imagine God sees the mall. It sees every little detail of the mall, was that, no, you're supposed to stay. So I'm like, oh, okay, so here I am staying, now what? So I healed Dorothy, and then I had the good fortune to quietly heal members of my family, and I didn't want people to know because, as I mentioned, I was working and living within the context of a kind of a meditation group here in Iowa, and so I wasn't sure how people would respond to what I was doing.
So I want to come back to that moment of giving up, because so very often when people are at crisis modes, that's when the greatest awakening happens, or when your mission you think is so oh, two-dimensional, like, oh, I'm working on this, I'm doing this, and then you hit this dead end or this health crisis, and then you see it's so much larger than you ever dreamed. It's so much more exciting. And it sounds like that's what happened for you, that, you were just looking at it like walking down this path, oh, I'm tired, and then suddenly everything is so much larger and grander. And so when I see people in crisis mode, I think, oh, maybe they're about to have a beautiful breakthrough.
Yeah, right. Indeed, they probably are. In fact, my perception is that cycle of being, it goes along with the archetypal stories, the great hero's journey, if you will, which I call the divine dialogue, which is an important part of the energy healing process. The cycle starts with the prince who's at home and he's happy and all is well. He's going to be the king tomorrow. And the next thing he knows, he's been cast out of the kingdom. He has no servants around, so he's got to find his own food, and things start going south, basically. He has to deconstruct his own definition of who he is. And I feel that that's what that whole experience was about. I was so oriented towards just being good and doing good and giving of myself to others and giving without any desire for any recognition or recompense at all. There are on so many levels, I was self-sacrificing for the sake of my world, that it was evident I had to redefine myself in some greater terms to appreciate who I really was. So I had to lose a lot. And so when the health fell down, I was losing that whole sense of being kind of like a very sweet angelic person, if you will. And I found that when I was in horrible searing pain, I wasn't quite as angelic as I had been before. I had a shorter temper. And I had I was going through moments of crisis where things were not okay. And what happened was I had to face my greatest fear. And that's what the hero has to do. He's got to break down who he thinks he is and get to that point where he has basically nothing left of what he thought he was. And it's at that point that he chooses. This is where we have a choice. You have a choice to face your greatest fear or to run away. And when I said, God, just get me out of here, take me, I don't want to do this, that was me attempting to run away. And instead, God was like, you think you're going to run away from this? Oh, you're going to go right through it. And I'm like, okay, I don't care anymore.
Oh, wow.
So through it we went. And I had to face my greatest fear, which was that there were parts of myself which weren't like just totally sweet and patient and tolerant and giving. And like I had to face the fact that there was a part of me that was going to stand up for myself. I had to realize I had teeth. And I could bite. And I could be harsh. And accepting that part of myself allowed me to then master it. Because when we're dealing with illness, we're dealing with some element which has invaded the physiology in some way or another, whether it's some kind of infection which literally physically invades, or if it's just some kind of imbalance in the system. And it's not a matter of going in and dealing with that imbalance by going, oh, I hope I don't hurt its feelings. No, I mean, you have to be like a mother who says, here's a boundary. If you want to heal something, and that's what the angels do, they have that ability to be able to place healthy boundaries in certain locations so that the energy channels and moves in a way that will help bring that energy to the part of the body that needs it. But setting those boundaries is not a matter of being wishy-washy or a compliant servant. It's a matter of being decisive and clear and strong and capable.
Did you have a moment in your own healing where you said, oh, I've really turned a corner and now I know I'm going to be fine? Or was it just a series of moments?
God, thank you for that beautiful question. Yeah, actually, I had an experience that I haven't really shared with anybody about that. Huh. And that was that I was sitting in meditation. Again, a lot of my experiences came up in meditation spontaneously.
That's great.
Yeah, and I had been feeling for a few weeks, about 2 weeks, that this was the end. This was the end. I was so ill that I really didn't think I was barely functional, and I didn't think I was going to make it, and I was ready. I was like accepting of that. And I sat in meditation and I saw this form, and this would have been what I call a divine download, because one's own highest intelligence can flood into the body in the form of what I call downloads. I'm sure some of your people have heard of that. And it came in and activated my Ajna chakra, pineal gland, to produce this vision of something that looked like a cornucopia, but it was spiraling down to like nothing. And I realized that I was coming down to this end, this dark end. And then there was a little voice that said, you do have a choice. You can go to this end. If you want, you can do it. Or if you're willing, this could turn around and it could open back up again. And at the time, I just decided that because of my children, not really for my own sake, right? But at that point, I was still caught in that I need to sacrifice myself for the world. So I just decided to do it. I said, okay, if I have a choice to come back, I'll come back. And from that little point of like that dead end, it opened back up, and the cornucopia opened back up like that. And there was a kind of a golden, it was like this golden spiraling form that just unfurled before me. And I felt transformed simply by experiencing the unfurling of that golden spiral. And when that happened, I knew it was a done deal. I knew I had like shifted over from one virtual possible reality to a different virtual possible reality. I like skipped universes.
Yeah. Oh, that's perfect. And so maybe people do a lot of things, a lot of little things, and then they reach that moment that is that turning point, as you describe, and to see it is just beautiful. I'm curious about the chart behind you. So I do want to just jump into this discussion. And could you explain more of, and I've seen some of your other videos, and I love that description of chaos versus order and that silent place where the real healing begins. Can you explain some more of this to me?
Thanks, Tricia. Bless your heart. So when I started, and when my vision opened up in the mall, like I said, it was like looking into an ocean, and I needed a way to navigate the ocean. So what I found were these points of reference, but because we're dealing with consciousness, which is infinite, consciousness is infinite, then the points of reference must also have a quality of infinity in order to effectively be a means by which we can understand the ocean of consciousness. So I actually have I only have two here, but there are actually four axes, I would call them, that I use to navigate the field of consciousness. And one, I'm sure all your listeners, everybody's really familiar with, and that's the range from larger than the largest to smaller than the smallest. Science uses that, right? Physicists, they look down into the little parts of creation, they get to the bottom, they go, oh, quantum level is infinite. Or they look out into the cosmos and they get bigger, 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 and they're like, when you get out far enough, it's just like infinite, you know? So there's this whole range from infinitely large to infinitely small, but the infinity is the same infinity at both ends. The first axis that I started really working with for the physiology was this one. And this one ranges, if you want to start in a black hole, it's like infinitely dense. So you've got infinitely dense to less dense, and we can come down to these areas where we're looking at like the elements such as earth, water, fire, air, and space, right? So these are from more dense to less dense, and we have physical body, which is made of the 5 elements. And then just under that, slightly less dense, is the etheric body, which is kind of like a map of the physical body. And the etheric body is so similar to the physical body that a lot of times pain and pleasure and physical sensation can actually be felt in the etheric body. And this is why, by my estimation, sometimes people lose an organ or lose a limb and continue to feel pain in the missing part.
Interesting. And maybe can I jump in and ask a question? Like after my near-death experience, I didn't feel like I was just contained in this body. And the first time I had to stand, I felt like my pain filled up the entire room. I didn't feel like it was contained in my body. It was like, oh, there it is. It takes up this whole entire room. Does that kind of explain the etheric body and the mental body and the emotional body?
Absolutely. It's absolutely possible, even for physical pain, to be stored at the subtler levels of the physiology. Because in a sense, pain, we experience it, you could say directly through our nervous systems, but the reality is that it also has an ethereal element to it. So yeah, we can experience that in the etheric body. And then mental body, I tend to divide to 4 levels. The avenue of awareness being the most outward level, right? Because our senses of perception, these are really a lot like brain organs. The senses of perception, if you look at the way a brain is, it's got these little organs in there, and all of these senses of perception are connected to various sensory cortices. So you have the avenue of awareness, and then the conscious mind, which associates with the brain, because that's where we experience thinking. And then the subconscious mind, which I associate with the central spinal column, because there's a kind of thinking that happens deep like the gut, right? They say the gut's like your second brain. There's so many neural connections there. So there's a kind of thinking that goes on there, but it's not really conscious thinking. It's like a more abstract type of thinking. And then the unconscious level of the mind that I tend to associate with the extended nervous system. So anyway, mental body, emotional body, the body of desire, and then the astral body and causal bodies. And I think this is where the really important work is done with regards to the energy healing process, because these upper levels of the physiology are associated with present life. Like pretty much everyone will recognize they have a mind, they have feelings, but there's so much more to human experience and condition.
So I have a question. Do you think that you're teaching people how to heal themselves too? So as you teach in your videos, I feel like I'm learning you to drop, say, the awareness of an issue into that dynamic silence and to wait for the healing and the answers to come out of that. Is that part of what you're teaching?
Thank you for asking. Bless your heart. Yeah, I realized early on that I can't heal everyone.
Yeah.
So it makes a lot more sense. There's that old adage about teaching a man to fish rather than feeding him for a single meal. So it makes a lot of sense to me that more valuable, it's always one of my main intentions when I meet with people, either through the videos or one-on-one or consultations or workshops, is to support everyone's ability to self-heal. It's very important. I feel like it's the medicine of the future, really. And what it does is it brings the power, the power to heal back into one's own, under one's own autonomy. And I feel as if a lot of times people get sick because they've given away their power, because they've put it up on some, I'm all messed up and I go to some expert and they're going to fix me.
And I'm just going to throw this out here, but how great would it be if you taught doctors to be more intuitive, if you taught medical professionals to combine their knowledge with this kind of awareness? Because there are some doctors who are, MDs who just have this intuition and, they relax into it at times. And then there are others who are just slinging prescriptions, like they're looking at a book and they're, like going by the book without really looking at the holistic makeup of an individual. But wouldn't that be great to combine?
It would be beautiful, because Western medicine is great. Western medicine saves lives. Western medicine is a wonderful, precious gift to our world. And so absolutely, it would be fantastic. If you went to a doctor, instead of just treating the body like a fleshy machine, they would be able to access their own finer perception and say, well, let me just check your astral body, see how that's doing.
Wouldn't that be awesome?
It would be wonderful. It would be wonderful. And it would be actually useful even now if doctors would, for example, ask people if they come in ill, if there's been any kind of challenging emotional situation that they've been in recently, because very often it happens that when someone falls ill with a bad disease, it's because they're overwhelmed trying to deal with something that's difficult for them. And it's very often is the case, if they can get the social situation in hand or their life situation in hand, that alone will help them feel like they're no longer in a state of chaos, but they've come back to a state of order.
Well, what would you tell people who are going through like a divorce, a move, loss of a child, who are going through an absolute, the loss of a parent, a chaotic moment, and they know from their past that they're going to go through a little bit of a healing crisis, or,
Right.
they're going to have a response to it. How would you, besides meditation and connecting with a greater peace, what would you tell people in those moments?
Beautiful question. Having understanding of the connection between what's going on inside in the heart and what's going on outside is very important to help stabilize the skill set required to handle difficult situations successfully. So I think what I probably, if it were just like, on the fly, off like somebody I met on the street or something, I would encourage them to get their hands up over their heart area and just take a quiet moment to kind of check into their essential truth. Because our hearts never lie. Our hearts always tell us exactly where we're at precisely. And I think what happens to a lot of people is because we don't have a language for the subtler levels of experience, as I did when I was a child, no one could give me words to describe what I was experiencing, right? Because of that, the truth tends to get caught here at the throat. And then the mind, which is responsible for putting the action into, for facilitating the action plan, that part, it gets blocked because it's like people don't fully understand even what they're experiencing. I think if people can take a moment and really understand what they're experiencing, it helps them really a lot. If they can at first understand it, and then they can accept it. They can accept, and when I say accept, I mean basically verbalize it or think it. They can find a way to put it into thoughts or words for themselves. Then there's a way of at least making some sense out of the chaos which they're in. So on the hero's journey, when he's thrust out of the castle and he's now a pauper on the street after a life of never learning how to even get his own meals, which is where people are in that state, the first reaction is awareness. He has to be very alert and he has to be very aware. And the second thing is, if we recall the archetypal hero's journey, he always gets a tool. He always gets a magic something. The wizard comes and gives him a magic stone or a magic sword or a magic something, some kind of tool, implement, or something that he can use when he faces ultimately his greatest fear. So we have to realize that all of these functions are contained within our physiologies. This is the beauty of living in the human body. The hero's journey is told at every point in the physiology. And the digestive system is a beautiful metaphor for that. If you take an apple, which is separate from yourself, it is a little bit of cosmic wisdom over the course of a season has gotten contained in that apple, and you start to eat it. What happens is it goes into the most sensitive area of the physiology. Our mouths are like hypersensitive. And as the apple starts to break down its own concept of what it quits feeling so much like a little apple, right? It starts feeling like little chunks of apple. At that point, the first thing that we do is we apply awareness, very clear awareness to that process. And the next thing that happens is the apple passes through the neck and throat area, and as it goes into the stomach, it meets up with all the hormones and enzymes and neurochemicals which allow it to really break down, and those are the tools. Those are like the magic tools of the hero's journey. And as the apple goes further down into the physiology, it eventually gets down into the gut. And the gut has this, I mentioned before, it's a second brain. It's this brilliant organ that allows, it's the part of the hero's journey where he faces his greatest fear, where the breakdown is so complete, he doesn't even know who he was hardly before. This is what happens to the apple. It comes down to particles so small, they don't even know. The apple doesn't think I'm an apple. All that's left is the apple's intelligence. And the apple's intelligence was built from the glucose made by the apple tree, which was built from the photons that came from the sun, which are billions of years old. And so the billion-year-old photons are the basis or foundation of the intelligence that makes up the intelligence of the apple. And at that point, the intelligence of the apple is like this, it's at a level of fineness, of physiology, that it's at the same level as the intelligence of the physiology. And it becomes absorbed into the physiology and is transformed from being a little apple to the intelligence, the consciousness of the apple spreading through the physiology and becoming human. And that's like the prince. He goes home and he's not a prince anymore, he's a king. And what we do is we go through the same cycle with the apple. We start out as a human with a certain amount of intelligence in us, and we consume cosmic intelligence in the form of an apple, and we integrate it into our own beings, and we come out of that process transformed.
It reminds me of my favorite childhood book, which was about a seed, and I think it was an acorn, and it was buried under the ground, and it thought, I'm in darkness, everything has left me, you know, like everything is over, you know, this is miserable, I'm cut off from my father, I'm cut off from everything, the light, the sunlight, the beauty, it's cold and dark, and, you know, I'm in hell, basically. And
Right.
then spring comes and it becomes a twig and it sees its father, the acorn tree, and its mother. And, you know, it's very happy, like, oh, okay, now I get to grow and I get to start this journey. And so a lot of times, like, growth is like that. You know, it is just, oh, this moment of darkness and how am I going to get through it? And then you realize, oh, here's the opening and how much fun can this be now, you know, to grow in a larger, more beautiful way. But yeah. So
I feel it's the very definition of what humans are, and it actually ties into this spot in my chart.
oh, yes.
Which is that, because I knew we wanted to talk about that a little bit, is that where is the soul of the acorn? Where is the part that makes it grow? Is it in the shell? No. Is it in the meat of the acorn? No. Is it in like you could say in the center of the acorn? It's in the silence between the meat of the acorn and the shell. There's a silent space, there's an empty space in every little seed, and it's in that empty space that the intelligence of the acorn resides. And this is a dynamic point, it's a dynamic spot in the seed of any manifestation. And in this chart, we have physical manifest self here, but this whole lower part of the chart, and if I step aside, you can see the Sanskrit names, these Saguna Brahm and Nirguna Brahm. So it's like an old knowledge, really. But this is the unmanifest level of creation. We can think of it as the source of creation. And it's from the source of creation that all the healing energy spring, and that all the intelligence and consciousness of the creation springs. And it's in that junction between sleeping silence and its state of awakening. It is, I feel, the very definition of a human soul is that spot, that tender spot where silence awakens to its own nature. There's an expansion that takes place in that spot. And here, it doesn't manifest yet. It's just like the seed of the expansion. But it's fundamental to everything that manifests. Yes. Sorry.
So would you say that, this is taken from a friend as well, but being less and saying less, there's a great power in that at times too, you know, that just in life, that dynamic silence or that pure silence, whether it's through meditation or just presence, is important?
Yeah, I think it's a really good technique, particularly if you're dealing with difficult people. Because sometimes people will say or do things that are rude, and if you snap back at them, it just ends up perpetuating that low behavior. But sometimes if someone says or does something really rude, they know it actually. And if you're just silent, it gives a chance for their words to reverberate in their own space. They can kind of think about what they just said. And often that's enough, I think, to turn people around, for them to realize, oh, did I actually just say that? I guess that wasn't.
Yeah, it's interesting. That's a beautiful tool. And there's a little bit of spiritual power in it too. I notice when I go away from someone who's saying that and, you know, just do something else or be in my silence, then even if they don't go away, they're just creating their own chaos in a sense.
Yes, it allows you to witness. And I think that's an important point too, when people find themselves in chaos, is being able to step back from the chaos and find a balance point. Because the resources that heal here, when they first rise up into the deepest, I would call the finest relative manifestation of self, we could call that, which is also where I identify the presence of angels. When that resource rises up to that area, what it does is it brings order. It brings, if chaos and order get out of balance, either way, it's not good. Too much order creates a kind of rigidity that disallows evolution and change and growth. And the expansion of consciousness is the nature of human beings. So human mind, human self. So we need expansion and growth. But if too much chaos is present, then of course, obviously things go awry pretty quickly. So the principle is that whichever direction the imbalance is leaning, the principle is to come back to that point of balance. That's why I put that O right there with my fancy technological skills.
And I do want to jump in about angels and the causal body. So when I saw my angels healing my spine, during surgery, they were sending this powerful, intelligent light through the back of the surgeons and into my body. And that light was intelligence, and it showed me the bone fragments will be picked off my spine. I will walk. But it was actually healing too. And there were so many things I learned in that moment. One is that angels can work through people, that this light is intelligent, this light is healing, this light is many things at one time, and that my own body is light. And so how could light affect light? Well, they're both light. It's just one is more denser. The physical body is more dense. But it stayed with me, and I just opened to that possibility of angels pouring in through me in the classroom and different times. So do you think when they're able to manipulate this reality, other people have talked about real miracles, like where their cars have been pushed apart and an accident has been avoided? Mine seemed rather connected to science in that, like the doctors were working on my spine, so the angels were just assisting,
Yeah.
So what do you make of their intervention, and maybe even other entities like saints or, higher beings that jump in at times?
Thanks for asking. Beautiful question. So I actually have a chart that's a little bit of a sketch from my side. I'm a little hesitant to throw it up because I know it's going to change, but maybe it just kind of gives us some scaffolding to play with. So this chart is called the 7 layers of the causal body. So I was looking at the causal body. If we go on the premise that all the different layers of the physiology have like a less manifest level to a little bit more manifest, less to more like that. That there are finer levels of the causal body and there are denser levels of the causal body. And it's my experience and perception that, here we'll put up this picture of the causal body. Oh, that's a complicated picture.
It's beautiful.
Are here. You see, can everybody see that on their screen? There's a little man right there. That's a body. And all this business out here is actually the energy field of the physiology. And these big circles here, maybe if I, sorry, I was pointing with my cursor. If I use my fingers to point, these big circles represent the 7 layers of the causal body. And so as we go out further and further, the causal body becomes greater and greater until it's as big as the universe. So I realized that there are parts of our causal body which are literally realms of creation. They're so big we can no longer identify them as angels or gods or devas or ascended masters or whatever. We actually need to understand, we need to break a little bit our conception of self and realize that there are aspects of us which are spaces, actually spaces of creation. And like a home, some of the rooms of the home are better for activities than others. So if you want to sleep, you don't go to the kitchen, you go to the bedroom. If you want to cook, you go to the kitchen, right? That idea. You want to read, go to the library. So and that's because those rooms are set up specifically to accommodate specific activities. So there are subtle realms and regions of creation specific for very specific activities. And they start out as a big region that includes the whole creation and then smaller like that. With regards to relationship, there are something I call sacred gardens of the heart. And anybody who loves knows that every love is unique. Every love relationship's a little different, it has a little different flavor to it. And so it's possible to access the various sacred gardens of your heart and your love through your own center of feeling for the physiology, right? That's what the heart area does, is it clues us into the feelings that we're having. And that's the language that connects our physical material realm to the subtle realms of creation, which also interfaces with the concept of angels, and that angels also speak the universal language of perception and experience, or feeling. It's a simpler way to say it. We can, if this is you, we can also say these can be considered realm areas, but also great organs. They're organs in the causal body. And you notice each one has a little body in it because they're living entities. The spaces and the realms and the angels, they're all both part of you, but also unique living entities at the same time. Okay, let's get back to the angels that healed you, Tricia. So, yes, the body is made of light. We experience it through the visual sense as light, but it's really consciousness. And so consciousness is even in a way more like living light. Okay, we can think of it as living light. So what that means is there are all sorts of varieties and types of beings that are made of consciousness, living light. And if all beings come from the being, from one great unified source of being, and human beings become fully physical, there's some beings that like to stay close to the light, and some beings who live up about halfway up from the light, and others that live 3/4 way. And if people see ghosts, ghosts are basically just individuals who are still living in their etheric bodies. So the etheric body looks like this body, but it's just not physical. But anyway, angels, very, very close to the light. There is light of consciousness in our bodies always, all the time. And the body is constructed in the womb from intelligences. The mother isn't thinking, oh, we're building the nucleus accumbens now. You know, she's thinking like, I'm tired. Give me ice cream. I'll take some ice cream now. You know, that's about it. She's not thinking like details, like the fingernails are forming and I think the eyes are going to be blue. She doesn't think that. She's just, who's thinking that? Somebody's thinking that. There's a level of body intelligence which is actually responsible for the construction of the physiology. And the same intelligence that's responsible for that construction remains with the body during the life and helps to repair and rebuild and regrow. You know, it helps to, you know, augment the various phases of development of the physiology and so forth. There are other forms too. If you notice, by the way, just a little background on the picture, it was drawn by my dear friend Harry Alto, who's had refined perception also since he was a child and has also been interviewed on Bat Gap. You might like to interview him too. He's a character. Anyway, very wonderful man, a wonderful man, absolutely. But you'll notice there's this spiral coming in here, and then it goes into, there's the body right there. And there's actually these cords, lots and lots of cords coming out of this form here.
And were those the cords that you were seeing in the mall, like connected to what they were carrying and different other things that they were connected to?
Yes, but what I discovered is the cords are ancient and they're actually life forms. They're actually life forces, and that they come in like a giant rope made of many cords into the physiology. And as they come into the body, the various individual ropes become the different systems of the body. That's why the nervous system, circulatory system, lymphatic system, even the skeletal system, it has a kind of a tree-like shape, right? Like all these bones are like cords, they're like cords. And of course, there are little bones that are more knuckly bones or something, that not as much, but the overall connection has a kind of a natural, we could say aesthetic or pattern by which it follows. And that these cords of light are life forces that are ancient and profound and knowledgeable and support the bringing of life force into the body. So if a part of the body becomes ill, such as digestive system, that's like a big cord going through the body, right? Then it's possible to make an association with that cord of light that's coming in through the crown of the head, that is anchored at infinity at both ends, right? Like a river rushing to the ocean. It comes in, it comes from source, divine being, which is infinite, runs through the body, hits the heart chakra, spins, and as it spins, it starts by creating the more abstract levels of the energy field, and as it spins tighter, it actually hits a kind of an infinite spin where it starts to form the actual flesh of the body. Anyway, it goes on into the center of Mother Earth and on to the center sun, which is also an infinite form. So from infinity to infinity, the cords are anchored, and they come through the body and are responsible for bringing the light force and for supporting the health and well-being of the physiology. When the angels were pouring energy, light energy into you, you probably saw something that was kind of like cords coming out of their eyes, yeah? Yeah. They're working with these cords. The whole field of life is made of these cords. I call it the web of life. And it's like a big web made of beams or of streams of consciousness that are anchored at infinity at both ends, and they weave together. Yeah.
It's interesting that this is yellow, because the light that I saw was kind of a bright yellow light that was, like that came out of their eyes and into my body. So is it yellow on purpose?
It was on purpose.
Oh, wow.
We did it on purpose, yes.
Wow.
Yeah, it is a kind of a golden light.
Yeah.
That flows, and everywhere there's the nodes cross each other, right? Everywhere the streams of light cross each other in the web of light, everywhere there's a knuckle, there's an energy form. And what's going on at those energy forms, oh, new diagram, everyone. Oh, this is going on. So there's a flow at each node, which is the darker, denser energies that have a kind of a, think of them as the first leg of the hero's journey, where he has to break down what he knows himself to be in order to build something better. That's the dark flow here. And that's the kind of breaking down flow. And then there's the other flow, which is the building up, where he returns home, the victorious king. And so these two, we could say constructive and destructive laws of nature, if you will, are together at every point in the web of life, at every node in creation, and they tend to push and pull in opposite directions. And because they do that, they produce energy, and that energy fuels the manifestation of this reality. So we have like a built-in engine that's behind the entire manifest field of creation, and it's this little push-pull. And the reason that it's important, the reason that this point right here on the chart is significant, or on this chart is the same, I moved too fast, didn't I? This chart is also significant. We'll go back to the other one so you can get a good look at it here, is because that's the point where one positions individual consciousness or perception, our point of witnessing, our point of reference, from that point of balance, because all along the entire, let's see if I point with my finger. I keep pointing with my cursor, and you guys can't see my cursor. All along here, this edge, every point along this edge is a point of perfect balance, actually. So wherever the hero is in his journey, if we experience the journey in darkness, okay, without awareness, we experience it out here on the edge. Oh, I'm lost, it's just darkness. The hero says, there's nothing but darkness here. All I see is darkness, right? But if the hero were following the hero's journey this way, he'd say, oh, I see there's darkness, but it's balanced by light also at every point. Does that make sense?
It does. That's a healthier way to navigate life, basically, that if you're aware of what is going on in the world, whatever that might be, whatever darkness or chaos that is, but you're clearly rooted in the light, you're not so far out into the light this direction that you're like, oh, I don't even know what's going on. I've isolated myself. I don't want to look. Oh, that's just terrible. People, that there's a whole manifestation theory that suggests that, you only focus on what's good and pure, and though beautiful and true, we are walking in this world, and if we were to transform it, it seems like that is the healthier path to walk.
Yes. This is the point of transformation, right? Where it goes from dark to light. So what happens is, like the web of light that has this push-pull at every point. This is a point of dynamism in here where transformation can occur, so that at every step of the hero's journey, he makes the right choice. He makes a choice in the direction of his highest transformation, of his highest evolution. And because it's a point of balance, it's also connected to cosmic evolution, because we know our universe is nature's constantly creating balance at every point.
And here's a quick question I have for you too. I've noticed that in my healing journey, sometimes I will go in and I think, okay, I need this healed. And instead it's some emotional problem that comes up and is healed. So sometimes people think, oh, I want to heal, this issue with my neck. And instead they heal a childhood wound. Can you explain why that happens? And eventually they get to the core issue, but it's like there's all of these other things that they work on sometimes before they get to that core issue.
Beautiful. Yeah, it's always best to do the energy healing work or any healing work from the seed or core of the issue. The problem is that very often, particularly if the issue is an old issue, it may have been buried a long time, and there can be habits of not looking at the core of the issue. And the reason is our human nervous systems are constructed to experience life sequentially. So even though at a finer level of our own being, we understand I am totality, I am the universe. But at this level, a moment and the next moment and the next moment and the next moment. And that's important. We need to do that as humans. We need to have that kind of nervous system because we provide a very, very important role in the universe. I'm going to answer your question, but I have to say this thing. If we imagine for a moment what it would be like to be God, like if you knew everything and you were everywhere and you were all the past and the future, you'd have everything, right? You'd own everything, you'd be everything. No, you'd be missing something really important. You'd be missing a surprise party, being surprised at a surprise party. You'd be missing learning something new. You'd be missing a lot of cool things that are like really important for experience. So what God did was create the relative material level of creation where we as humans help fulfill that aspect of the creator, which is to have experiences of expansion of awareness and expansion of consciousness, expansion of happiness. All that experience comes from having a nervous system that experiences life sequentially. So,
Oh, go ahead.
yes, go ahead, ask. I was kind of like winding my way around to your other question, but let's.
Oh, no. I'm just out of curiosity. When you do healings, do you feel energized by the experience? Is it something that, you feel, oh, this is healing a part of me too, or it's expanding me in some way?
Absolutely, but definitely because I realize that I'm not really healing anybody.
Yeah.
Really, people heal themselves, and that's the bottom line. So for sure, as long as the healer can maintain that status or position rather than setting themselves up as a big authority that's going to heal you, but just giving the personal power back to the individual that they heal themselves by accessing that level of their own consciousness. Where were we on that one? This one? Or this one? Accessing that causal level of the physiology, which has the facility to pull up the resources from silence and then apply them. This is the application level right here.
And don't you
applies to this level here.
And don't you think so many people are just hungry for that? Like I sense it in the world, and I sense that, when times become more chaotic, we're longing for the miraculous and we're longing for healing. And I think that's a beautiful place to be in this world at this time, is to see people so open to this. I wonder if you're sensing it too.
I think actually it's one of the reasons people get sick. I mean, it was absolutely the reason I got sick. I got sick because I needed to know this. And I wouldn't have stepped onto the path of learning it if I hadn't been sick and trying to heal myself, And I had the experience, and so many people who come to me do, they'll come and they'll say, I've been to doctors. I've been going to doctors for years and it's not doing it. I mean, God bless the doctors, they help lots of people, but they're those that they don't heal. And those are the people that are like, they're ready to reclaim their power and to start actually applying their own capabilities to self-heal. So that's why a lot of my job is just teaching people to heal themselves.
And I did want to end with a healing, if that's okay with you. And I wanted to direct it at first to something kind of esoteric, but I think I'm just going to let you choose what you feel will be best for this video and my viewers and people who are often coming to near-death experiences to feel comforted by the fact that there is an afterlife and that we do have this connection to healing, to angels, to even intuition and some psychic powers, and all of these gifts that I think get blown open sometimes during near-death experiences. But that's the crowd largely, I think, that comes here. But also they come for discussions like this one. But if you're open to that, I would love it so
Oh
much.
yeah, let's totally do it. Let's totally do it. I just would like to say though, Tricia, I feel like there was your last question that I still didn't fully like complete.
Yeah.
That makes sense. So if I could just take a moment just
Oh,
to
yes. That,
complete, then we'll go to the healing. Yeah, because it was such a beautiful question about how when a person falls sick, they start with a symptom, and the symptom is easy to identify with awareness. But the seed or source of the symptom is often sitting at a subtle level of self, like in the feeling level, or even deeper. It can be very, very sometimes deep, like ancestral memories or belief patterns, or it could be sitting in some really hard to reach place. So it can be a little bit like peeling the layers off of an onion skin. You start with the symptom and you look at the part of the body, and I use inference because I know that if there's damage in the mouth, that's the part of the hero's journey where the hero has been thrust out into some chaotic situation and he doesn't feel confident that he's got the tools to deal with what he's doing. So when healings happen for the mouth, it's always to support the activation of the gift that the mouth brings, which is to start making awareness very acute. That's just an example, but all the different parts of the body are different. They'll have different, we could say spiritual significances. And if anybody's familiar with the work of Louise Hay, which probably most people are, she has that lovely little book that compares the different parts of the physiology or different illnesses to different sorts of imbalances.
and in some of your videos that I've seen, like the healing for the teeth, you went back millions of years with people biting into things that were difficult to chew. And that made so much sense to me that, yeah, our environment and how we interact with it, sometimes things are painful. And I felt that healing, going back a long, long time. So this isn't just our ancestors sometimes, but it's that huge field of experience that you're working with, which is
Absolutely.
so
Absolutely.
interesting.
That's so beautiful.
And
All right, so, yeah.
how did you zero in on that, like time frames with, maybe it's ancestors for 5 generations back or millions of years?
Oh, thank you for asking. It's such a brilliant question. I do it by repeating patterns that I see in the web of life and in the field. So I'm using my finer senses of perception, which were developed through years of meditation. I mean, like I said, as a child I had, but then as a teenager, very rough. And I lost my fine perception. But when I started to meditate, I regained my fine perception and more and more. So thank you and God bless for that. But there are certain feelings that are, and as I mentioned earlier, there's this universal language of perception and experience that really connects everything in creation. And so there are each thread, I thought this would be a good backdrop for the healing. So each thread has its own energy signature. It has its own feel to it, if you will. Just like every person has their own personality, So there are certain feels that are related to ancient. And I've developed this skill, which I consciously, intentionally developed, which there's a video of mine for, which is to get very kind of clear, quick yes and no answers. So sometimes if there's a feeling of ancientness, or say there's a feeling of France in the 1700s or something, there's some feeling like that, like different epochs in human history. Ancient Egypt has its own feel, right? The ancient Greece has its feel. Atlantis, whatever. Then if I want to get down into like more detail, well, like exactly was it April 1723? Like if you want to get down like quicker yes and no answers, what I do is I just ask very simple yes or no questions, and I look for either a feeling of like opening expansion is a yes and like a closing contracting is a no. And that helps me figure out, oh, it looks ancient. Well, how ancient? Okay, well, is it 10,000 years? Yeah, okay. 12,000 years? 20,000 years? 30? No, not 30. I got a contraction on 30. So then I know, and I narrow it down, and it's a little bit the harder, like slower. It's a little slower than just saying, what year was it? But somehow that's the way this body functions. That's where I'm at this time. And it's something that you guys can do too. You can just ask yes and no questions. And you have to be a little bit tuned in right here, right? Because this is where your truth reveals itself. So that's where you'll feel it's like, oh yeah, oh no, I don't think so, right?
Yeah,
So
the body's a finely tuned instrument that if we pay attention to more often, then we will pick up on these things. And
it
that's,
does. It reflects the whole universe.
yeah,
It's
that's so
telling us
interesting.
like it's receiving 2 billion bits of information a second from the whole universe, and it knows it. And then it's filtering for us so that we don't get overwhelmed. So the body's super wise, super wise.
And as you were talking about from childhood, the rough patch in teenage years, and then the regaining of those powers, I think that traumatic situations or tough situations or whatever it might be can shut us off from some of those abilities. And I always think that if we teach very sensitive children how to navigate this world early on, then maybe they wouldn't get shut off, in those moments. Or if that's part of trauma healing or difficult, like part of therapy too, if some of this was taught, then I think, bringing in that healing energy in a traumatic moment or in a tough moment or in, those teenage years are so tough no matter what you're going through. I see them and I work with that population and love them
I
because they will
know.
go through a breakup even, and that can cause them to want to commit suicide, if they have a tough enough
Yeah.
background, then
Yeah.
they're really in a delicate state of being a lot of times. And I
Yeah.
think that, oh, it just would be great if energy healing was taught or validated at those times.
Yeah. It's very teenagehood is it's a very tender time. I also taught at the high school level when I was teaching, and God bless the children. They have a lot. It's like a trial by fire or something, They have to get through. If they can get through that, then they get to be grown-ups, and it's not quite so bad sometimes.
Yeah, but they sometimes still have a lot to heal. I love that population, that college population too, because it's like maybe they've gotten away from some of those issues and when they were teenagers, but now they have to heal them in order to become these magnificent
Right,
adults that they want to
right,
become.
right, absolutely. I think I would say pretty much all people, unless a birth is horribly traumatic or unless the nervous system is very badly damaged, I would say that the souls that come into the world, all children are very open to their own divine reality, but yeah, it starts to block up at various points along the way. And I feel that the best thing that we could do as a culture to help cultivate that sensitivity in the youth is to start using a language that incorporates words to describe those subtler experiences. Because if children are having them, and if they have a way to understand their experience, then it becomes integrated into the wiring of the brain, and then they don't lose it. But if they don't have a way to describe it, it's not as easy for the brain to make coherent neural connections in order to accommodate the experience and support the perception, senses of perception. And on that note, that makes a lot of sense that we should go into a healing for refinement of perception, perhaps, or
Oh yeah.
something that would help. So I always like to do like a little prayer of gratitude at the beginning of my healings. So that'll just take a moment and then we'll dive in. And what I'll be doing, just to tell everybody, is I will be acting as the voice of the healing and looking into the collective consciousness of the viewers. And even though that we're taping before we go online, it doesn't matter, because at the finest level of creation, space-time is integrated. And so even now, as Tricia and I are speaking, we can feel your presence, we can feel your sweetness, we can feel your love. And so, so I'll look into the field, and then it's my great privilege and honor just to give you whatever you need, whatever comes up, and I'll just speak it. But you're doing it. Being is doing it. Thank you to the source of creation for everything. Thank you for blessing the healing and for being all the forms of creation which heal and all the forms of creation which perpetuate the flow of knowledge, the great holy tradition of wisdom. Thank you to everyone's ancestors. Thank you to the divine in all of us for blessing the moment of this healing with efficiency and effectiveness. that we may go to the core of the concern and address that in the highest and best possible way. Thank you for empowering everyone watching this healing with the resources and knowledge and experience required to support your own healing, to become self-sufficient and self-sustaining and master of the energy healing process yourself. Now I'm just going to look, and I'm going to speak as I look so you know what I'm experiencing. So the first thing I'm seeing is very interesting. It is in the area of the heart, and it is a non-cohesive energy, which means that I'm seeing that in the heart area there seem to be like bubbles or ripples or different kinds of densities, colors, some darker, some lighter energies in the heart area. And I think that's very interesting because the heart area, the physiology, is a major key for mastering one's own energy healing process, as it allows us to connect what we experience through our senses of perception, the material world, with the fine realms of creation where the resources for healing reside and the capabilities to activate and apply those resources reside. So we're clearing self-doubt. That's the first thing. In the heart area, some self-doubt, some lack of trust. And as the lack of trust is clearing, I'm seeing meridians lighting up between the heart area and the solar plexus area. It seems that the self-doubt has been connected with moments or experiences of the past where one felt powerless. Either one had given away their power, had lost their power, had it taken from them in some way or another. And those experiences formed a kind of a foundation for self-doubt. So you see we're peeling off the layers of the onion skin here. We start with one and then we get to a deeper level. So now from the area of the solar plexus, what I'm seeing happening is the coming of order. And these streams of light that are part of our whole world, our whole universe, they can come to the body in various forms. They can come in as just like a shower of liquid light, or they can come in as a stream of light, or they can form together to make an orderly structure. And that's what I see happening in the solar plexus. Something that looks like a grid or a sacred geometry. It's okay, people fall asleep when I do this sometimes. It's really fine. It's healthy. It means you're listening at a very deep level. This matrix, it's matrix of light. Each place where the lines cross is a energy structure which works together with all the other nodes in the grid in a synergistic manner to create a very stable form. And this stable form that I see coming in is it's a love matrix. I'm seeing a love matrix. I'm also seeing a 32-point matrix, which through my understanding of energy healing, there are many types of matrices, and you can even custom create them. But the love matrix and the 32-point matrix are working together. They kind of sit over top of each other in order to support a redefinition of self in terms of your universal status or stature. The resources are within all of us, but sometimes we don't think of ourselves as powerful beings. Sometimes we think of ourselves as fallen or weak. And that comes from specific experiences, which are even more, I would say, impressions are clearing from the solar plexus area. And also some discordant feelings are clearing from the solar plexus area. And for some people in this healing, I'm seeing cords releasing, which connect you to dysfunctional relationships. I'm seeing people that are in like little bit codependent type of relationships, or relationships with others which are not allowing you to rise into your true status as the being of light which you are. It's making it like make you doubt yourself that you're that being of light. So those relationships are being blessed. And we talked earlier about sacred gardens of the heart. I'm seeing the whole field of light opening up now, and those sacred gardens of the heart opening up through the whole ocean of our collective. And in those gardens, those relationships which are not supportive of your evolution, or which have features which are destructive, those relationships are opening up. And what's happening is this web of life is moving so that a stream of life comes to the center of each of those gardens. Think of it like a beautiful temple to the mother of creation in the center of each garden. And it's a center of silent light is sitting there to act as an anchor to stabilize the flow of cosmic intention, cosmic evolution, even in those relationships. Even in those, and I'm seeing with them this feeling of impossible. People are thinking it's impossible. You can't divorce your family. I'll never get rid of the relationship. No, you don't get rid of, because it was chosen. We came into the relationship in this life. Instead, there is a structure in the causal body which is specifically designed to undo the impossible, to take apart a catch-22 from its roots. So any impossible, and as the catch-22 is dismantled, along with the dismantling are all those impressions and underlying beliefs that life is a certain limited way, which it is not, and limited beliefs in also suffering and chaos, that life is terrible, which it is not. So it looks like in these particular cases, there are situations where there's an imbalance on both sides, too much order and too much chaos at the same time. So what's happening is the awakening of a flow of balance from that holy silence, from that gap between pure silence and its warmed up dynamic mode of functioning where it knows itself. That balance is flooding into the body like a kind of a light medicine, and it's moving. I'm seeing it in our audience, moving through every level of the physiology. And we talk about health as balance, right? Being in balance. So balance at a physiological level, as it comes into the body, this balance is presenting itself in very pure terms. So even the cells of the body experience, balance. That's what balance feels like. But all the way through mental, emotional, etheric, astral, causal, all these levels, the balance is able to flow through everyone's physiology. Now we go back and check the heart. Now we go back, and as I'm going back to check the heart, I'm seeing old energy. So I'm asking about ancestors, I'm getting a yes. I'm asking about the collective consciousness of our world, I'm getting a yes. What I'm seeing here with the collective consciousness is, as we heal ourselves, we move. The moves that we make to heal ourselves happen on a very abstract level of our being. And as that happens, it actually affects our whole world. And so the wounds of the past, which have been left untended because people didn't know about energy healing, and they didn't know. I have a girlfriend who only does energy healings at concentration camps of World War II. That's all she does. You should probably watch this video and comment too, because she often does. But there are places like that. There are places in our world where seeds of discourse have been planted through experiences that were very difficult. And the byproduct is that they remain as seeds of discord that have the potential to rise up in this world and cause trouble now, in this generation. So we're actually going back to those spots. And I'm feeling them. They've been located through our collective consciousness. As a people, as a human family, we know where those spots are. So they sit both physically in the earth, that there's their physical expression is in the earth, but also they sit within the field of our consciousness, the consciousness of the wholeness of our collective. And it's at that level that attention is applying. We're focusing our attention intelligently to support moving into those little nodes. They're like little areas where the discord sits. as a collective, we're super powerful. This is the type of healing that can be done in a group. It's all of us are doing it together. It's beautiful. I bow down to everyone here doing this as a collective. You guys are amazing. So we're going into these pockets. And in the pockets, we're activating this, the balance between dark and light. The same balance that every one of us in this healing experienced in our physiologies, we're now able to extend that to locations in our collective that need it now. And as that clears out, discordant feelings are clearing from those areas, and many other sort of darker malefic energies are rolling out of the system, from very dense ones like discordant feelings down to very, very abstract morphic fields and morphic resonances and impressions, and all those little feelings that got stuck in those areas are able to roll out. And I can feel we're kind of, as we come to the end here, that the locations in the collective that have been affected by our healing today are now radiating waves of loving gratitude. And as the waves of loving gratitude come into our collective, we can just let that loving gratitude go back to the source of creation within us, because it all came from source in the first place. And as we allow ourselves to be the vessels for the flow of the gratitude and appreciation and love and lots of forgiveness, then it allows us to cultivate within our own nervous systems the ability to deal with those energies on large scale, but also continues the perpetuation of the effects of those energies out to the larger collective continuously. Because as we offer it back to source, it just multiplies to infinity yet again. So thank you, everyone, very much for being with me for that.
Wow, thank you. That was very profound for me. And as we were sitting here, you'll never guess what my view is looking out at. I'm looking at a criminal justice center. So there's a beautiful river behind my college campus and a jail. And you don't know how many people have sat in this jail and seen the light of this campus, left that jail and come here and started taking classes. And it's just, you know, I sent some of that energy to the criminal justice center as I was sitting here, and it really is really powerful. Really powerful.
Oh, that's so beautiful. It's so beautiful. So beautiful. Wow, Tricia, we did that together.
Yeah, it's amazing. But thank you so much. There's so much I could say about that. I'd love to hear more from your friend, because I've thought about this a lot, about places on earth that need healing.
Oh yeah, my girlfriend. I can put you in touch with her.
Yeah, amazing.
Yeah, of course, I'd be happy to do that. And I can put you in touch with Harry too, if you'd like to talk to him at any point. And it's just been a total pleasure and a huge honor to be on your show, Tricia. I have so much respect for the work you're doing, and I feel that it's absolutely vital at this time in history. As you said before, I feel that people are really hungry for this knowledge, and people know at the level of their essential truth that there's so much more to them than they are actually able to necessarily express through the regular channels that our culture and society have provided thus far, and that we need to restructure what, even at a collective level, we kind of need to restructure our reality so that we can accommodate that greater potential that's within everyone. So thank you for being one of the great instruments, the great players in that process, and providing something at this level of accessibility to people on YouTube. It's just a huge service that you're doing.
Thank you for what you do and the healing that you've already provided in my life. It has been an enormous gift. But
Great.
Thank you, listeners, and please like and subscribe to my channel. I'd like to offer more videos like this one and really branch out into all different topics of healing and spirituality. And I appreciate your support. And if you feel moved to donate, I also have a donation button. But thank you very much, and may you be deeply